Uh-oh, my screen just went blank. There we go. I'm back. All right, good afternoon, everybody. Welcome to another webinar. Today, we are going to be talking about weathering the perfect storm, succession planning done right. Today, your hosts are going to be Sarah Burnham. Sarah's got like 27 years of fleet experience, which is amazing. NAFA board member, a couple of NAFA awards under her belt. And yours truly, my name is Nathan Schaefer. So we both are fleet success managers over at RTA. So I got about 25 years in the fleet industry, currently helping customers do some of the different things for them. All right, so today's agenda. We're going to be talking about the perfect storm, right? Creating some succession planning, the impacts of the retiring baby boomers, why it's a challenge, how it can hurt your fleet, what you can do to prepare, building a succession plan, and some real world stories. So you're facing the perfect storm. Are you ready? All right, I'm going to hand this section off to Sarah, and she's going to talk about the impact of retiring baby boomers.
Thanks, Nathan. So what is the impact of baby boomers retiring? So we're starting to see, we're probably experiencing this now, but a lot of baby boomers are retiring. They're in leadership positions. So there's a leadership vacuum. So we'll talk about that a little bit more in a second here. We're also having a technician shortage right now. Vehicles are increasing in complexity, and we have a lot of knowledge loss from people leaving the industry and retiring. And then we also have some rising costs across the board. So what is a boomer and what's a baby boomer? So as most of you may already know, baby boomers were born between 1946 and 1964. So there was approximately 76 million that were born during this time after World War II. So they're currently in that retirement age. So they're between 60 and 80. And right now, or over the next 5 years, we should see about 16.4 million exiting the workforce. Boomers actually used to be the largest segment of workers in the workforce, but that actually changed in 2019. If anybody would take a guess, I would not have guessed this, but it is actually millennials. And I think for me, I probably wouldn't have guessed that, is because from my experience in working in some of the past companies or organizations I've worked with, there wasn't a lot of millennials or the younger generation. And I think part of that is too because we're facing this technician shortage. So at least it seems with my experience, the demographic of workers was probably more on the older side than on the younger generation side. So we also have, boomers are leaving the workforce, and they're leaving, in some cases, people unprepared to step into those leadership positions because there's no plan in place. Maybe there was no person available that could just step into the role. So oftentimes when that happens, you have to bring somebody from the outside that may not have any institutional knowledge. And then the other challenge is leadership oftentimes is learned through experience. I think leadership skills is something that's not often taught as you get promoted into positions. A lot of times maybe you might be lucky and you have somebody that's taken you under your wing, or they've been a great example to you for leadership skills. So, quite honestly, it's not something that's, kind of passed down. So that's contributing as well. And even the skills may not be passed down. A lot of times we get promoted into a role and then we don't get exactly all the training that we need to be successful. So we also have the technician shortage, which is also compounding the boomers retiring. So we have about 67,000 technician vacancies per year, and then we only have about 37,000 completing technical and trade school programs. So lots of people leaving, but not as many stepping into the industry. I do think, I think most of us have seen that, there was a decline in technical schools being available, but I think within the last maybe 3 or 4 years, that's starting to trend back upwards. But it's not enough to meet the demands of the exiting employees. And then on top of that, the industry is growing as well. So the needs are not getting met. So with the retiring baby boomers, we have this loss of knowledge. Many fleets, and not just fleets, but just organizations in general, may not have a lot of documentation on processes and procedures. I know that's something that I've personally experienced a lot in different organizations that I've been with. So boomers are leaving with their knowledge. Hopefully you're not like me. I had somebody leave and they literally took all the files with them except for 2. So not exactly wasn't setting me up for some great information there. I doubt that that's the case for most people though. And the other thing is that vacancies, especially if you have a lot of vacancies and lengthy vacancies, it's causing more strain on other employees, right? Because people have to pick up, there's a loss in production, if you will. So a lot of times those responsibilities are getting put on others, so over time that can really hurt morale. And I've seen this a little bit myself. So it's definitely something to be aware of. And I think that speaks to why it's so important to fill vacancies quickly and have plans in place for the next people to step into these roles. We actually, RTA did a podcast. I believe it was Josh and Steve Saltzgiver. They did a whole podcast on this. I recommend checking it out as far as the documentation aspect. It's episode 150, and you can find it anywhere you get your podcasts. It's a really great episode. So we also have rising costs, right, across the board. So there's talent gaps, increased costs. So if we have less technicians available in the field, then that's naturally driving up salaries. I'm seeing that a lot in dealerships, but in government, it's very difficult to increase the salaries with the market. I'm sure a lot of you are facing that challenge. And then we have rising costs across the board. It just seems like just about everything on your budget line has seen an increase, which has been tough, especially for government fleets trying to manage their budgets. I know a lot of people are facing budget cuts this year in how they can reduce their spending. And then vacancies also hinder service quality, right? Because there's a challenge when you have vacancies to keep up with the demand. So you have decreased availability. Vehicles aren't available because maybe, they're stuck in the shop because you can't turn those vehicles around like you were able to before. And so things like that. And then you also have quality issues because people don't have the all the skills and the training, and so maybe things are leaving out the door that maybe shouldn't have, and so all those things affect customer service, which isn't good when we have some governments are looking at should they outsource fleet. So it's not a good situation when you're facing people asking that question and then they're unhappy because you're not able to meet all their demands. So we're kind of talking about the perfect storm here, right? So Nathan's going to talk to us about how you can use your data to mitigate some of these challenges.
Yeah, thanks, Sarah. And some great things that I kind of want to back up a little bit too, and talk about, some of these people that are retiring and leaving with institutional knowledge kind of leave that organization in a jam. So, what we're seeing and what I've seen with a few different customers that I work with is that they're bringing people in from other areas of the organization to try to manage a fleet, and those people may not have a fleet background, and that really does also tend to lead to rising costs because they don't understand the fleet management practices, or they don't know it very well, and so they're trying to get up to speed, and really slows things down. So just some scenarios that I've seen with some customers recently. So all right, weathering the perfect storm with data. So this is a pretty easy thing to look at. As long as your data that's going in and the data and reporting you're collecting is good, you can start to look at some of that data and make some uh, you get some insights into how your organization's operating and how things are running. Um, but before you know how much baby boomer retirement will impact your fleet, obviously you need to know the current state of your fleet, right? So having good data, being able to look at costs, and really see, turn times, how long jobs are taking in the shop, looking at that repair history. Tech productivity is a good one to help you look at some of this stuff. So if you think about these things, right, like just think about um, the tech shortage, right? Or not having technicians trained. Maybe you've got a master tech that leaves, and he was doing all the really complex stuff and he leaves, and somebody that's been maybe assisting him, he's that person may be taking way longer to do the same jobs, right? Which is costing more money. And looking at some of that repair history or productivity will tell you some of that stuff. Some of the turnaround times and availability, turnaround times, jobs taking longer than they should, or what you think they should, can tend to lead to some of those skill gaps, and things like that you can identify. All right, so when we talk about some of the data, right, we want to make sure that you have a good data set. Your FMIS should be giving you those insights, making sure your data is accurate and up to date. We talk a lot about using standardized coding, so whether that's vehicle class coding, repair codes, VMRS codes, which is a national code set. NAFA's got some good class coding out there. So, making sure that you're standardizing the data is going to help you with reporting, and make sure you're pulling everything together, uh, in a good way. So, verify that your numbers aren't skewed, right? Maybe find those outliers and take them out of the data, and then verify that current staffing levels are set appropriately and positions are utilized efficiently. So, you know, making sure you have the right amount of technicians is all math, right? We can look at our fleet. We know how much repair time that fleet should take, and then we know how much wrench time our technicians should have. So we can do math and know if we have enough technicians. And by using that data, we can ask for more technicians if they're needed, right? And so we have data to go and get that resource if we need it. All right, so a couple of examples or reports of data in Fleet 360, which is our TA software product. Obviously, availability, we're the inverse of downtime. Turn times, so work order turn times is a great thing to watch and know, how long stuff's sitting in the shop. Backlog, repair history by VMRS is a great one. I always tell people, AI is a big thing in today's fleets. If you're running repair history by VMRS on a regular cadence, you can start to see trends, and you can become your own AI, right? You can start to see some of those issues that are starting to spike or whatever. Productivity and efficiency for your technicians. This is a great one to watch. Not so much about being big brother and all that stuff, but really just seeing how how efficient they are at their jobs. Do they need more training? Are they the right person to be doing that repair, right? And you can identify that stuff. Direct versus indirect times. How much time are they billing to work orders versus doing other things? And then return work. What's the quality, right? So some of the things that Sarah talked about, you start losing some of that quality. You can identify training issues. Like some of this reporting will really help you identify that stuff. All right, Sarah's going to talk about weathering the perfect storm with documentation.
Yeah, so one thing to add to the data and or something to keep in mind is as a government fleet, particularly if you're in Florida and you have natural disasters that you need to be prepared and planned for, um, don't forget to consider that too when you're looking at your back if you have any backlog or your turnaround times are being affected, because we have to be ready to respond to disasters, especially for road clearing equipment or if you have first responders that you're dealing with, because those vehicles need to be ready to go, not in the shop. So that's something that I used in the past, to help get justification to tackle some of the backlog that we had going on. So definitely keep that in mind as well as you're working through your data and putting together a story that you can show your management on why you need the resources that you're asking for. So as Nathan mentioned, I'm going to talk about documentation. So you want to start documenting all your processes and procedures. This is actually one of my favorite things to do when if you've promoted someone, have them be the one to start documenting the processes, because it gives you a really great opportunity to learn the process, because you have to learn it so well that you have to be able to write about it. So it was actually something, when I went to the highway patrol, I started as the fleet office supervisor. And so my first job was to make this procedure manual. And it was the best thing that I did because I quickly had to learn everything that went on in that office. So it's great for people, like I said, stepping into those roles, because then they can really learn it. Make sure you make the documentation accessible for everyone. This is super key for cross-training and being flexible, especially if you're in a disaster-prone state like Florida, where you have hurricanes. Being able to have those documents available for anyone to pick up and run with them is key. It also make sure you have the opportunity to review and ask questions to get clarity on those processes and procedures. And then not everything needs to be documented, but you want to make sure that you're covering your key functions and key processes. So this is something, so RTA offers a software solution where you can essentially put all your documents into one spot within the system. And this is something that I've implemented in my the fleets that I've worked with, is having that centralized location for your team members, but also you can make this available to your customers, so they can go directly to your website and find all the forms they need, any policies and procedures. Having that in one spot really is helpful for customers, and it cuts down the need for customers having to call every time they have a question. They can reference the site and find the information. Okay, so Nathan, do you have anything to add?
Yeah, I mean, the Fleet Wiki is great. You know, it allows you to dump those policies and procedures right into the FMIS, so everybody has access to them. You can even put links in there to other things. It's a good place to centralize documents, like you said, and it's a good practice to do that so everybody has access. So yeah, good stuff.
All right.
Uh,
So
go
sorry.
ahead.
So now Nathan's gonna walk us through succession planning.
Thanks, Sarah. All right. So, weathering the perfect storm with succession planning. We're just going to give you guys some steps and things that you guys can take to start looking at this stuff. So, no one's going to stay in their jobs forever, right? And I always tell people to document things. One of the things that I see repeated over and over again, and I'm just going to throw this out there, is for some reason, the parts room. Um, you get parts in there that aren't necessarily in inventory, or you get the technicians that hide stuff under their bench, and nobody knows we have them, right? You've all seen it. I know you have. So what happens when that parts person, you know, goes home and maybe they have a family emergency, right? Or maybe they get sick or whatever happens and they don't come back to work for a long period of time or ever, right? All that inventory that was in their head that's not in the system is now nobody knows about it, right? So we're losing money. Same thing here, right? No one is going to stay in their jobs forever, whether they move on to a different, get promoted, move on to a different organization, whatever it might be. So you need to be proactive and plan now, and especially for that attrition, because it's going to happen. So have solid, repeatable succession plan in place, and then succession plans give rise to development plans. All right, ensure continuity of leadership and key roles, right? If we have a good succession plan, we're prepping somebody to take over those leadership or key roles as those people leave. Start identifying who's going to step into those critical positions when someone retires, resigns, or gets promoted. If you are in a leadership position, you're probably already looking at this stuff. You see where people have good skills naturally. You see the things that they're learning, and hopefully you're talking to them, right? Hopefully you're having those weekly one-on-ones, or you're walking the shop floor and talking to everybody. You're walking through the admin office, whatever it might be. But as you talk to these people, you're going to start picking up on what their goals are and what their career objectives are, and you can start identifying these people pretty early. Be role specific, so usually covers leadership and mission critical jobs first, and then we're often looking at short to medium term planning, right? 1 to 5 years out. All right, so 5 steps to effective succession planning is we got to identify the key roles, right? Who are the key players? Where do we need to start looking at to start with? Your fleet manager, obviously, admin, people that are maybe doing fueling, parts managers, shop managers, stuff like that, okay? So define the capabilities and the skills, assess and ID employees that might be good to be a part of that succession plan, and then start looking at training and development plans. One thing with the training and development that we did in our shop is when I first took over the city, we were split into a light and heavy duty, right? We had technicians that all they did was heavy duty. We had technicians that all they did was light duty. And as I started talking to all these guys on the shop floor, a lot of the light duty guys were like, "Hey, I'm interested in working on some of the heavy duty stuff. Like, it looks pretty cool. I've been doing light duty for years. Like, I want to start looking at that." And the same on the other side, like the heavy duty guys were like, "Yeah, I've been doing heavy duty forever. I'd like to start working on the gas stuff," or whatever the case is, right? So we kind of started just breaking that barrier down, and we started letting everybody kind of work on everything, start to learn. We did training for everybody on whatever they wanted to do, and it really paid dividends for us, especially during COVID, right? When we had to start shutting things down, we were able to split our shop into 2 different, shifts, so to speak, right? But I didn't have to stress about making sure I had light and heavy duty and emergency, vehicle people and on both shifts. It just made it a little bit easier because everybody was kind of cross-trained. And then evaluate effectiveness. All right, so step 1, right? Identify that key area and position vulnerability. So identify the mission critical roles, right? If you got somebody that is doing fuel uploads or doing all your fueling stuff, probably need to make sure somebody else knows how to do that as well, right? Focus on leadership and specialties, assess vacancy risk. So if you have a high turnover position, think about like tech ones, right? You get a tech one brand new to fleet, they hear about a job that pays $1 more down the street, they're probably going to go there, right? Because they can make $1 more. Usually that's a pretty high risk for vacancy. So map those essential organizational roles. Okay, anticipate or let's see, consult senior leaders, right? Talk to them and what they think. Anticipate future needs, and then prioritize by operational impact. If somebody leaves, like who leaving is going to impact the organization the most, right? And concentrate there, and then roll down. All right, so to define capabilities for key areas and positions, we need to establish some selection criteria. So identify the key competencies. So along with what Sarah was saying earlier about documenting their roles, and then set performance measures or metrics, right? How do we look at what their job entails? How do we measure this success? All right, identify and assess interested employees. Okay, so this is kind of what I was talking about with, walking the shop floor, doing your weekly one-on-ones, talking to your employees about what career interests they have or what they're interested in doing. Do they want to advance? I found a lot of interesting answers when I walked through the shop and asked those questions. Some of the answers I got were not fleet related, right? Like they didn't want to be in fleet forever. And then some of these were people in the shop that were like, yeah, I'd like to be a fleet manager one day. I think it's really cool. It's very complex and it's interesting to me, right? And so we started taking steps to get them training in fleet management. All right, step 4, develop and implement succession and knowledge transfer plans. Okay, so incorporate strategies for the learning, the training, the development, transferring of organizational knowledge, documentation, transparency, right? So just kind of learning, getting them training, start developing a map for them of what they could do in the future, transferring that organizational knowledge. It might simply be, hey, learn the policies and procedures manuals, right? Understand everybody's different roles, and then just document those plans and use that transparency. All right, so evaluating effectiveness. We have to evaluate and monitor succession planning and management efforts to ensure the following, okay? Succession plans for all key areas and positions are developed. Key positions can be filled quickly. New employees in key positions perform effectively, and an adequate number of candidates for roles. So I talked about this a little bit earlier when I mentioned that, some organizations I see are pulling people from other areas of the organization. Maybe they're an operational manager in some other segment of the business, and because they understand operations, they get plugged into, okay, well, now you're going to run the fleet operation. And sometimes that new employee in that key position cannot perform effectively, right? Because they don't understand all the intricacies that might be going on with fleet management. So some good steps to think about. And then I'm going to hand it over to Sarah to talk about strategies that actually work.
Awesome. Thank you. Oh, one thing I wanted to add to that was when you're developing your development programs, don't forget to think about like soft skills and leadership skills, and not just on technical skills. I think that's really easily, it's easy to fall into the trap of making sure they have maybe all the fleet and specific job related knowledge, but are there other skills that go along with that position, especially when, like I said earlier, leadership often has to do with comes with experience. So is there training that can help supplement some of the lack of experience? And then also don't forget to do mentoring. Can you pair somebody up with another? It doesn't even necessarily have to be levels and positions. Sometimes it could be seniority. Stretch assignments are also, I love stretch assignments where you're giving somebody maybe something that they don't have experience with, but it gives them the experience to do something that maybe they haven't done before. And then job rotations as well is another component that could be added to the development program.
Yeah, good point, Sarah.
Yeah. Oh, and then I also wanted to add too, like being super transparent and clear when you're working with individuals, because we might be working on a development program with them, but that doesn't guarantee that they're going to be put into the role. They need to do the work. If they're not meeting, expectations, be sure to communicate that, and and don't overpromise, because the worst thing that could happen is that maybe the person doesn't end up getting the position for whatever reason, and then you end up losing the person that you've invested all the time and energy into. So, okay, so strategies that work. So what works? So we need to start marketing your technician program to outside people. So I recommend creating like a marketing program where you can highlight the features and benefits of working in fleet. A lot of technicians that might be going in school right now, maybe they're not aware of fleet. That's been my experience. They have their eyesights on dealerships, but they don't know that there's the fleet industry out there. So put together some flyers. You could even, we did a video where it was like a 7-minute video where you could highlight all the cool things that are going on in your fleet. Get those cool pieces of equipment, whether you got, if you're in Florida, maybe you have boats or walking excavators, or we had airboats. People love to see that. You have heavy equipment. And then also be sure to promote your employee brand. So get yourself out there on LinkedIn, or even create a external facing web page to show and highlight all the things that are going on in your fleet. Host fairs, tours, presentations. So these, the tech schools that are in your area, they likely have a automotive, or they have a program advisory board, and they're looking for people like you all to serve on that board. So reach out to the schools, see how you can get involved, and then make those connections so you can do the fairs, have a tour, bring them into the shop and let them see firsthand what you're doing, and open their eyes to options in fleet. You can even do presentations where you can go to the school and talk about working in fleet. I will say, we did a presentation at a local college, and we brought a technician with us, and after the presentation, he was surrounded by probably 20 techs in that school, all wanting to talk to him personally. So consider bringing a tech with you, not just yourself as a leader. Also expand training with incentives. So whether it's ASEs or we had a fuel program for people driving fuel trucks. So having that hazmat endorsement. So we needed to make sure we had a certain number of people with those endorsements. So we created like a fuel truck driver stipend program. And then also any non-monetary awards that you can do. There's tons of opportunities there. We would do like a technician, or we would actually have it by the different positions where people could vote on, like technician of the year, things like that. And so we also have, I kind of touched on this a little bit, but expanding your incentives and compensation programs. So it's tough in government, right, to get salary increases, right? So you definitely want to try, and even better if you're able to benchmark against the other fleets in your area, to set those, what is everyone else paying and how do you stack up? I know I personally had trouble getting increases, so I went after everything else I could possibly go after increasing, like ASC pay, if you have stipends for that, tool allowances, You can also, this might be tough in government, but if you can offer sign-on bonuses, that's an option. Shift differentials. And then you also want to make sure that you have career paths and tracks established. So, how could somebody essentially start off as maybe an apprentice and then work their way up to technician one, two, or three, and then you have like a lead worker type position. So making sure that you have those established and then you have those pay scales in there. Not only does that help with recruitment, but it also helps with retention and employee engagement, because people know that, if they do want to move up in the organization, they have something to work towards. I touched on this a little bit earlier, but just make sure you're expanding your outreach, working with all the different vocational schools in your area. And even maybe you don't necessarily have to talk to just the specific automotive program. Maybe you start earlier and you talk to the kids that are considering going in the automotive program. Maybe it's something that it hasn't been on the radar. Reach out to other organizations that may have relationship with automotive technicians and get them interested in working for your organization. There's some great veteran programs out there. I know Zoom is working with NAFA to establish a skill bridge program to basically be able to tap into some of the military that have not quite retired, but they're looking to make that transition. So I would recommend checking out that program as well. And then be sure to develop employee outreach programs and leverage retirees as mentors. A lot of the retirees that have left the industry are not quite ready to leave, and they would love to help mentor somebody that's still in the organization. So what else works? So as we're working on these positions and getting them filled, we want to make sure that we are still hiring the best person for the best fit for your organization. We don't want to settle. I've seen in organizations, they hire because, they're putting a body essentially into the position. So the Fleet Success Playbook is it's a book that RTA CEO Josh Turley, Steve Saltzgiver, and another gentleman created. It talks a lot about defining your values and why that's important. It's something that I personally got to experience coming to RTA because they tell you what those values are right up front. So it's which ours are humble, hungry, and smart. So when you're communicating with candidates early on that what your values are, it gives them an opportunity to decide if those are the right values for them and whether they're a good fit. And then also when you stay true to those values, it really helps you make sure that you're hiring somebody that's really going to fit in your organization. Because if you're hiring somebody, like in the case of RTA, if that person is maybe lacking humility and they're difficult to work with, then after you've coached that person, then maybe it's maybe they're not the right fit. And I think most of us in government fleet, it's really important to work through these conversations early, right? Because it can be really challenging later on if somebody's not doing as well as you thought they were going to do. So also be careful of bias and when you're looking at promoting individuals or whatnot, just because we have on here avoid bias and loyalty. So um, just because somebody seems on the surface like they might be a good fit, maybe they do have some technical um, experience, maybe they may lack certain skills that may never, their personality just doesn't give rise to the position that they're looking at. And then you want to develop multiple successors, not just one person, right? I recommend making this an organizational process and developing everyone, not just the successors. Creating, like I said earlier, like creating those career tracks. How can you get everyone's skills being brought up? And then leaders grow the next generation. So those in supervisory positions should know that they're training the next generation, and that's part of their job. Is so that when they leave, there's people that can follow them. And that's one of my favorite questions to ask a manager is, how do you know when you're a successful leader? Well, I'd like to see when they say like, well, I've developed these people, and they can name specific people that have been promoted on to another position, right? Because they have some leadership skills there. All right, so Nathan, do you want to summarize what we've gone over here?
Sure. So, make sure that you guys are being proactive, identifying those key roles, doing that early and often, right? I think some of that's natural as you start to talk to people and what they want to do. Define capabilities and skills. So looking for those skill gaps, making sure you're providing training, assess and ID those employees. Like I said, you're going to be talking to them. Training and development plans. So training, can include lots of different things. It doesn't always have to be paid training, right? Like a lot of the OEMs and vendors provide free training for your technicians. I know a lot of the parts vendors provide training for your parts people and things like that. So make sure you get out there and take advantage of that. Evaluate and adjust, right? It's not a set plan. You got to review, evaluate, make adjustments to keep going. Expand that marketing compensation and career tracks. So one thing in the city, and Sarah touched on this, that we used to do, we were able to kind of up the ASE pay. We constantly looked at upping a tool allowance because, as inflation happens and things like that, we wanted to make sure that we were providing something that worked. $100 a month doesn't go very far on the Snap-on truck for your technicians. So, think about what you're giving those guys. And then take your fleet to the next level, right? As you start to get some of this stuff set into place, like how can you keep improving and taking it to the next level?
Yeah, I think that you'll find that because you've went through this process, you have the documentation, you have the development program in place that as a result, you're going to take your fleet to the next level.
Yeah, for sure. All right, Sarah mentioned the Fleet Success Playbook. So if you want to order a copy, you can scan the QR code you guys are seeing now, and we'll ship one out to you. So I'll give you guys a few seconds to scan that.
It is free, so.
It is free. Or come see us at one of the fleet events. We always have a ton of copies with us. All right, we mentioned that podcast a little bit earlier. Scan that QR code. You can start listening to it now. Spotify, all the places you find your podcast, you'll be able to find it. Some really good episodes in there. All right, RTA Consulting. So not only do we provide FMIS software, but we also provide consulting services. We have a lot of industry knowledge working here at RTA, not just Sarah and myself, but a whole lot of people. I think we're 400 hours or so, or 400 years of experience, something like that. So, ton of fleet experience behind us here. We've probably seen it just about everything, and we can help you out.
Yeah. On that note, too, the consultants, if you need help doing any staffing studies, our team has lots of experience doing that as well. So, or staffing, bay, size, anything like that. So.
Yeah, so we're going to jump into questions, and there's a good one here that I want to jump into real quick first. And it's how to find good technicians with the pay that municipalities are paying. Um, I'll throw out some things that I did, and then we'll let Sarah throw out some of hers. But Sarah mentioned this earlier, and it's talking to the high school tech programs, talking to the college tech programs. Um, what I found at the college level tech programs is that a lot of your dealers and big OEMs were already in there and can offer way more pay to start than you can in the municipality, their cities. So one thing that worked for us is we really started showing the benefits packages, right? And we were pretty lucky at our city. We had some really good benefits. We had a medical clinic at City Hall that was really cheap for employees and their families. So really start looking at what things you can give outside of just upfront pay, because the benefits are going to outweigh some of that stuff for some. Um, so benefits package is a good one, and then other things outside of that. Sarah touched on, what you can do. ASC pay is a good one. Um, we got free work boots every year, so that's another incentive that is nice to throw out there. Obviously, good insurance plans, especially if the premium is mostly covered or all the way covered, by your city, is a huge one. Private industry fleet or private industry insurance costs are crazy right now, so that was a huge one for us that we could point out. So I'll give it over to you, Sarah, if you got some other things or thoughts.
Yeah, that's exactly what I would say is highlighting the benefits, and often that outweighs, especially for those like wanting to start families. The benefits is key, and then highlighting the career tracks as well. That they have the opportunity to move up within the organization if that's something that interests them as well. And also, too, I know a lot of our techs liked the variation in work that they did. So it wasn't like all vehicles. It was they're doing something different every day.
Yeah, that's a
So
good one. The opportunity to work on fire trucks, right? Everybody likes fire trucks. So it's a good one. Okay. Somebody's asking for the QR codes again, so I'm going to jump back up to the one for the book, and we'll let that sit there for a few minutes, and then we'll move to the other one. Um, Another quick question I see is where would be a good parts vendor for training? Honestly, we got some of the best free training we could through Napa. Believe it or not, we use Napa as a vendor. Obviously, we used quite a few other vendors, but they had a lot of really good free training. If you reach out to your Napa store, even if you don't use them a lot, if you have an account with them, they'll probably get you set up with some training. They usually host some regional stuff too, where you can send multiple people to. Sarah,
yeah,
do you have any experience with some of that on the
yeah,
park side?
same. Same. We use Napa, and I think they even do some ASC prep coursework as well. So I would definitely recommend checking that out, or and maybe asking if you other vendors if you're not using Napa.
Yeah, I know we had a ton of OEM vendors that would host training nights that would be after hours, and that's another good incentive to send your text there and tell them that you'll pay them for the time or whatever. Um, so it's a good way to do that. And that made me think of one of the other things that we did too is for ASEs, right? If we had technicians working on ASEs, like they were struggling to find time and go take the test because testing centers were only open certain times. And so we just made it a thing where it's like, hey, you can make the appointment during the week, and we'll just pay you your salary to go do these tests. Like that's how important they are for us, for you to have them. So just little things, even like that, right, can make a little bit of a difference. All right, just looking through questions here. Let me skip to that other QR code real quick. Okay, and then one of the people in the comments said they partner with vocational skill apprenticeships, and that's a good one too. Yeah, we actually started an apprenticeship program where we would hire people kind of straight out of school with zero fleet experience if they were interested in it. Um, it actually ended up being a really good recruitment for us. We got a lot of people that would come through there, and a lot of the people we hired would actually have some decent experience and then end up staying with us for a while and get promoted to a full tech one or whatever level, and then open that spot up again to start bringing people in, and just it was a good pipeline for us, right? It helped us bring people in at a kind of a lower pay with no skills, kind of train them how we wanted to train them, really assess how they were doing before we decided whether or not to promote them. So it was a good work for us.
Yeah, I agree. We had 7 people on that had started out as interns, and then we had actually promoted one of them to manager before I left, which was super cool to see that. And then we also created like a lower level position that could help with like vehicle prep or other things like that, that didn't exactly have the automotive background, didn't really want to go into the technical side, but he was interested in staying on in the organization and doing another support role. So that also gave him like a career path to work towards.
Nice. All right, let's look at other questions. Well, something I wanted to ask Sarah, because I think you have, some pretty good experience at your last role doing some succession work. So tell the group kind of how that worked for you, and some of the strategies maybe we talked about today that kind of worked for you.
Yeah. So thank you for asking me that, because that reminded me of some things I wanted to mention. So I was a part of 2 succession plans, where the first one was at the state patrol. The assistant fleet manager and fleet manager was leaving, so they, within the next 5 years, they brought me on as the office supervisor. Through that role, I did the documentation of the procedure manual, which I mentioned earlier. So I basically got to learn like every single thing that we did in the fleet office through that. But I also signed up for my CAFM as through that program, and that was key for me in my career. So if anybody here hasn't done that, recommend it. And then I recommend considering doing that for if you do want to create like a succession plan for a leadership position, like for your position. If you're in leadership, if you're like a fleet manager. I also would highly recommend that the plan be documented. Because they created an assistant director position at Palm Beach County as part of the succession plan because the fleet director was leaving. And so they wanted someone to be able to learn and to step in. But we didn't really have a formal documented plan. And so next thing you know, the director's leaving in 2 years instead of 5. And there's all these different things we haven't covered. But there wasn't really a document in place to like kind of check off all the things that needed to be learned before he left. So those are 2 things that I would highly recommend, is having that documented plan and being intentional with it. So yeah.
Yeah, I think it's important to document that plan. If you ever watch Mark do presentations, he's got a couple of slides where he talks about the complexities of fleet management and all the different things that you're doing as a fleet manager, right? And so you're not going to learn that overnight, right? And if it's not documented, then somebody comes in and completely has to like figure it all out on their own. So it really is pretty important to get some of this stuff documented for the next person. All right. Let's see. All right, what type of information would you include in a wiki page if you were going to build one for your fleet?
So I would include, well, I kind of touched on this earlier, but I would definitely include, because you can build one for customers and then you could build one for your internal team. So I would highly recommend putting everything fleet for customers on your fleet page, so they have one source to reference all the information they would need, especially if they can, drivers can access that, so they know what to do if they have a breakdown or an after hours emergency. And then for internal, I would throw all your policies and procedures in there, and have that one source for your employees to reference, and have those like that procedure manual documented as there in there as well. What would you
Sure.
say?
I think some of the cool stuff that I've seen recently is you can actually make that page, you can make a landing page. So when people log in, that's what they see. And so throwing in some like announcements, updates, to your fleet people, because they're usually the ones logging into the software, right? Uh, so some of that stuff I think is pretty cool, and you can even drop links in there for things. So creating that homepage and making it be like the landing page for resources and updates or announcements for the organization, I thought was pretty cool. So you have great ideas. I think that's important for that stuff to be there, but just a different kind of use case I saw recently that I thought was super super neat.
Yeah. Yeah, we actually we also promoted, like, if a tech had got master ASC status, we would put that on like the web page, like kind of to your point. Little, like, what are the little wins you can include on the wiki page, like to kind of showcase all the good things that your fleet is doing.
Yeah,
And we would put on there like even birthdays and stuff like that. It was pretty fun.
yeah. Oh, that's great. All right. Let's see here. Okay. Any other thoughts you'd like to share?
No, I do. My last thought would be, I mentioned stretch assignments earlier, and giving people maybe tasks that might be new or different to them, is like, how can you can use your succession planning as an opportunity for that. So how can you help? What stretch assignments can you give somebody as part of the succession plan to help build it? Give them a piece in the ownership of it, um, and give them, different opportunities that way. And I think that, as you walk through this plan, you're going to find a lot of areas for opportunities that are just going to bring your fleet to another level.
Sure. Yeah, I think cross training is super important. Looking at how you backfill positions when people go on vacation. I mean, that's an early indicator on where you should be, documenting processes. When if somebody goes on vacation and that completely stops, that process completely stops because nobody knows how to do it, right? That's probably somewhere you should start concentrating on. So, just some quick, easy ways to start looking at your organization and figure out where to start working on some of this stuff. So. Awesome. Well, I think that's going to wrap up our time today. I appreciate everybody joining us for the webinar. Apologize for my camera. Not sure what happened there, but we'll see you guys next time.